Hey, Chiefs Kingdom, let's put our support behind Eric Bieniemy. If you think he deserves to be a head coach in the NFL this next season, like this video. Just hit that thumbs up icon. Look, we'd all like EB to stay in Kansas City forever, but hey, he deserves to be a head coach. So if you're with me, like this video. Let's get 500 plus likes on today's show. And with that being said, we got the latest on EB plus 5 potential offensive coordinator replacements coming up right now. You're watching the Chiefs Report. I'm your host, Harrison Graham. Eric Bieniemy is kind of the top talking point right now when it comes to the Kansas City Chiefs because Black Monday was a couple of days ago and several teams are starting to interview candidates to be their next head coach. Bieniemy has interviewed for 5 of the open jobs, all of them except for the one I thought made the most sense in the Houston Texans. And it doesn't appear that they are going to interview Eric Bieniemy, at least as of now. I think that's very strange on their part, but hey, if they don't want to hire a good candidate, that's on them. But with that being said, Andy Reid continues to support EB publicly as a head coach candidate. It seems likely that this time he will land a head coaching job, considering he's interviewed for 5 of the 6 jobs. Andy Reid has publicly endorsed him for a couple of years now. He's a name that continues to get brought up. If you keep interviewing, eventually one has got to stick. I just think it's pretty likely that this is the time for Eric Bieniemy to land a head coaching job. Now, these are the 6 openings, and like I said, EB has interviewed for all of them except for the Houston Texans. You got the Falcons, Lions, completed those interviews on Monday. Obviously, the Texans' job is open. Completed interviews with the Jags and Chargers in the last couple of days, and then the Jets as well. So lots of teams are interested, and these are some enticing jobs. Let's be honest. 3 or 4 of these are very tempting jobs, and I think if you're Eric Bieniemy, this is a good time to get out on the market and potentially take one of these jobs. I like a lot of these openings with young quarterbacks, especially the Los Angeles Chargers. Which job would you like to see Eric Bieniemy get? Let me know in the comments. You don't want to play him twice a year, so you don't want him getting the Chargers job. Shout out to the Texans. You don't want to face him with Deshaun Watson. How about Atlanta? I think that's good for both sides. I think it's a good opportunity for Bieniemy. You don't have to play him that often for the Chiefs. That would be a win-win for everyone involved. So let me know, what job would you like to see Eric Bieniemy get? All right, let's take a look at some potential Eric Bieniemy replacements because, of course, if he gets a head coaching job, that means the Chiefs have a vacancy at their offensive coordinator position. So I came up with 5 names that could replace EB as Andy Reid's offensive coordinator, even though Reid does call the plays. Number 1, and this is really the top candidate. Usually I'd go down from 5 to 1, but you got to mention Mike Kafka off the top because he's getting buzz around the NFL to be an offensive coordinator. Even Adam Schefter reported about a month ago that he could be a sneaky head coaching candidate. It doesn't appear that's the case, at least for this cycle, but this makes the most natural sense, right? A guy that's worked under Andy Reid, a guy that's worked under Eric Bieniemy in recent years, a young up-and-comer that Kansas City really, really likes and Andy Reid really, really respects. He'll get an offensive coordinator job either this year or next if the Chiefs don't retain him. Like, he will find an upgrade in job title from quarterbacks coach to OC unless Kansas City promotes him if Eric Bieniemy leaves. So I think this is the ideal fit. If EB ends up elsewhere, I'd be pretty surprised if Mike Kafka isn't the offensive coordinator. But we do have some other candidates, and we'll get into those in just a second. But first, who should be the OC if Eric Bieniemy leaves? My answer is clear. It should be Mike Kafka. If you think it's Kafka, you can type his name. If you think it's someone else, let me know in the comment section who should replace Bieniemy if he leaves this offseason. Next up, in a name you probably weren't expecting to see, how about Duce Staley, a player who played under Andy Reid in the 2000s with the Philadelphia Eagles and has been a coach in some capacity with Philadelphia since 2011, including for a couple of years under Andy Reid before he got let go in Philly. Staley's been able to stick around despite all of the coaching changes there. What does that tell you? He's gone from Andy Reid to Chip Kelly, now Doug Peterson. He's a culture guy. The Eagles like him a ton. And he's worked his way up the ranks. Started as a special teams coach, running backs coach. Now he's the assistant head coach and running backs coach. When Doug Peterson got COVID during training camp, he appointed Staley to run the practices. He was the interim head coach, if you will, while Doug Peterson was sidelined with COVID-19. He's moved up the ranks 45 years old, has a lot of time. And if you're Staley, you could look at Bieniemy and be like, hey, that could be me. I could go work under Andy Reid, not necessarily call plays, but be heavily involved. Maybe I'm the next head coach of a team in 4 or 5 years. I could see that very much being a possibility. I think Kafka's the top candidate, but I would give Duce Staley a call and see if he's interested as well. Now, it is AFC wildcard weekend, and the Chiefs, of course, have the bye week because they are not playing this week. I wanted to give some of my picks for this weekend from a betting standpoint. I like the Bills -7 against the Colts at home. I know it's a bit of a hefty spread, but Josh Allen looks like an MVP candidate. He's playing well. If you want to make some money, bet on the Bills -7. Also, Tennessee getting 3.5 at home against Baltimore. I know the Ravens are playing well, but remember when Tennessee thumped Baltimore last year in the playoffs? I like the Titans getting more than a field goal at home in the playoffs against Baltimore. I'll take Tennessee, and then I love the under in this other game. Pittsburgh, Cleveland, I think it's going to be a low-scoring AFC North kind of, junk it up type of matchup. Love the under 47.5 in that football game. If you want to bet on any of these games or any other NFL playoff game, the NFC games as well, the NBA, you can do it all at BetUS. Go to chatsports.com/ChiefsBet. Use that promo code Chiefs125. That's going to get you a 125% deposit bonus. I just gave you some of my picks, some of my betting advice for this week, but if you disagree or if you do agree, you can place some of those bets as well. Chatsports.com/ChiefsBet. Take advantage of that promo code. It's Chiefs125. My number 3 offensive coordinator candidate, if Eric Bieniemy is gone for next season, how about Pep Hamilton? I like the work he did with Justin Herbert this year with the Los Angeles Chargers. He was their quarterback's coach. He's called plays in the past at a couple of stops. He was with the Indianapolis Colts. He called plays for the University of Michigan in recent seasons as well. I just look at what the Chargers were able to do, and obviously he connected with Justin Herbert pretty well because Herbert had arguably the best rookie season for any quarterback in NFL history with what he did this year. Almost 67%. Over 4,000 yards, 31 touchdowns, a quarterback rating of just under 100. I think Pep Hamilton, who's kind of had a windy career, could be a sneaky candidate because you're not asking him to call plays. You're just bringing him in here to work under Andy Reid and be a part of the offensive game plan, and he can work with Patrick Mahomes and the other quarterbacks. I think this could be a sneaky candidate. I like Pep Hamilton. He's not my top guy, but I think he's someone worth at least looking into if you're the Kansas City Chiefs. Now, speaking of Justin Herbert and the Chargers, who is the biggest threat to Kansas City moving forward? I think it's pretty simple. Type DEN for the Broncos, type LAC for the Chargers, type LV for the Raiders. Doesn't it have to be the Chargers with what they have at quarterback? Denver's a mess at quarterback. Carr's fine, but they don't have enough to challenge Kansas City in terms of a 16-game schedule. I think it's the Chargers. They get some pieces around Herbert. Mahomes, Herbert, that could be a fun rivalry for years to come in the AFC West. Now, if you love the Kansas City Chiefs, we'd like to think we're the place for you because we have free Chiefs videos all the time here on YouTube. Just subscribe to the Chiefs Report. Hit that big red button. It's free. Videos 4 or 5 days out of the week. Plus, we'll have live watch parties during the playoffs starting next week in the divisional round. If you don't want to miss any of it, hit that big red button and subscribe today. My 4th candidate, and then we'll round things out with our number 5 guy, Bill O'Brien. I'm not super enthusiastic about this one, but the reason I wouldn't completely dismiss it is this could be an opportunity for him to hit the reset button, right? Obviously, he has some good attributes. You don't become an NFL head coach and make the playoffs multiple times by accident. He's a good offensive mind. Here's the deal. The Texans gave him way too much power. He should not have been the general manager. He should not have had the authority to trade DeAndre Hopkins. That's ridiculous, but I'm not asking him to come in here and do that. I'm asking him to be another offensive mind working with Andy Reid, working with Patrick Mahomes. You can't say Deshaun Watson, his development had nothing to do with Bill O'Brien. I'm sure he had a hand in that relationship. Obviously, it didn't end well in Houston, but could be a chance for him to rebuild his image and work with a really good offensive staff. I wouldn't say I would do it, but he's worth vetting and talking to if you're the Kansas City Chiefs or really any other team as well. So would you hire Bill O'Brien? Type Y for yes, type N for no. Not as a head coach, obviously. Not even as a play caller. Remember, Andy Reid calls the plays. So keep that in mind when you vote. Y for yes or N for no. The ultimate dark horse here, but I thought worth mentioning because of the prior relationship. How about Brad Childress, who most recently was an offensive analyst for the Bears? Older guy, 64 now, but him and Andy Reid go way back to the late 90s and early 2000s, and he was the OC for the Eagles under Andy Reid from 02 to 05 before being the quarterback's coach before that. Brad Childress knows Andy Reid. Andy Reid trusts Brad Childress. He did some good things as the Vikings head coach as well. Went to the playoffs a couple of times. He was the Browns OC in 2012. Oh, and then guess what? He worked with Andy Reid again from 13 to 17 in Kansas City and was even the OC in title in 2016. That prior relationship is there. I like Brad Childress as a kind of stable mind. Again, I don't want him calling plays. He's a boomer. He's 64. But he gives you another perspective. He's a guy Andy Reid would be comfortable with. I don't know how interested he is in coaching. He claims he retired earlier this year after his short stint with the Bears in April. You know, maybe he doesn't want to coach again. But if you're Brad Childress and Andy Reid comes calling and you're like, hey, want to come hang out, be a part of the offensive game plan and win some Super Bowls? That's pretty enticing if I'm Brad Childress. So who should be the Chiefs offensive coordinator if Eric Bieniemy leaves, which I believe he will? I want to ask you guys this question one more time. We asked you at the beginning. I'm going to ask you at the end here. Who do you want as the Chiefs offensive coordinator if Eric Bieniemy leaves?